Hello, Sanna-Mari here, and this is my first ever video on YouTube, but I have been commenting ever so often and not so often on Steve Donahue's channel about books. And there's now going around 2 on Has Steve Read It challenge, and it's been fascinating to look at what people have thought Steve might not have read, and books that people have thought that Steve has read, but then turns out he hasn't. I work in a library, so having actually copies in my own shelves here was quite difficult, and also a few of them I had to make sure that there are actual in English translations and that they were actually at some point available in the US. But let's see. My first 2 choices are a bit embarrassing, but I decided to start with the ones that might aggravate him or not, or embarrass me as a reader. As a librarian, I'm always fascinated at what people read, and the one series that has been very interesting that people read incredibly a lot has been Lucinda Riley's The Seven Sisters series. And I started reading it so that I would actually know what patrons see in it and why it is so popular. And I want to include in my 8 books, the first one is the first one in the series, and it's called The Seven Sisters, the first one, the Maia story. And Lucinda Riley produces a lot of books, and I think Steve reads these, or not these, but has read this one, but just decided to start with this. Because at the first time when I read this, the modern parts is divided into 2 parts, the modern part and the history part. The modern parts do lack some sort of interesting points, but the history part has quite well written, and you can't really tell which one of the parts is fake fiction. I almost said fake. Which parts of the history telling is fiction and which one is not. So I'm going to throw this one in as my first bait, and let's see how it goes. I would be surprised if he has read these, because sometimes people say that books targeted at women in the romance genre are worthless, but because I know Steve appreciates good romance, so I want to hear his opinion whether Lucinda Riley is good romance or not. And the second one is also in some way considered romance category, Olivia Goldsmith's The First Wives Club. And the funny thing about this copy is that I bought this very, very young. I bought this copy in the mid-90s, 1995, and this was just after the movie came out. But what I find funny in Olivia Goldsmith's writing is that she is incredibly good at catching the humor and the essence of a woman when she thinks about herself in society. And I would throw it in the same category as Lucinda Riley. And sadly, people don't read Olivia Goldsmith after her death anymore, so this is my second bet on the list of Has Steve Read It, The First Wives Club. Then I went to my shelves and looked at translated works for him, which have been available in US. And the first one is one of the most famous translations from Finnish, is Emmi Itäranta's Memory of Water. This is a future telling of a world that has run out of fresh water, of drinking water, and tea has been the one thing that people consume water with. And water has been sort of receding, and only the closest parts of the northern pole have water. And it tells how water is important, how wars are started over water. So Memory of Water is my translated 3rd pick. And I'm at odds with this. I've kept this book and I've talked about this book to young people and how important it is to see that water is our most important asset. So Emmi Itäranta's Memory of Water is my third input. This seems very listy, but let's go. Another translated author is Finnish Tove Jansson, and she writes the Moomins, but I'm these Moomin books are not my put on as Steve read it, but instead it's The True Deceiver, which I think is her best adult fiction novel. It tells about a woman who has been very isolated, has lived very isolated, and she has this new friend who just sticks to her like an eel. Can you say that? Well, maybe you can say. And this woman who is very isolated suddenly finds out that this woman who has been circling around her moves in with her in her cabin, and we start to think as readers that this is not going to end well. She did write few novels for adults, and I think they are, almost all of them are very good, but if I would read any book by her for adults besides the Moomin books, I would start at this because it's very clever at creating this very tense and scary moments where you think that is this young woman who has moved into this sort of rich woman have some sort of dark thoughts about her, and is this just about assets and money, but is it also about loneliness? So my fourth pick is The True Deceiver. And then I work with kids at the library, and my ultimate favorite children's book, which I almost every summer read again, is Astrid Lindgren, who's a Swedish author, and this has been translated quite early on into English in the 60s, I think. I don't know if they've made translations again. It's called The Seacrow Island by Astrid Lindgren. This has the cover of the series, which I watched when I was a kid. But this tells about the well-doing Swedish Stockholm people who go to the Stockholm archipelago during the summer, and then there's the difference between the city people and the country people, and just like the kid in the cover, there's this one child. I don't know how they've translated her, but I so much identified with her because I spent my summers in the archipelago and boating and doing fishing with my grandmother, and there were always dogs and cats around, and it was so idyllic as a childhood, and it's so well replicated in Lindgren's book about the island living and the fact that we didn't live in the islands through the winter, but we went there as a summer. And the Seacrow Island is a nostalgic children's book, which I know that I can't recommend to today's kids unless they are rabid readers, because they won't understand the nostalgia and the imagery that is created in this book. But I would still read this together with a child, definitely. So this is my, I think, 5th pick on this challenge. And hopefully this will get me at least one bean. Hello to the little bean, by the way. So Astrid Lindgren's The Seacrow Island. Then 2 books that I bought for my first ever trip to London on my own. The first one is a play. So I don't know if this actually qualifies, but I'm going to put it in anyway. This is Alan Bennett's The History Boys. My first ever play, which I watched live in London, and the first ever play which I actually read in this format, besides some works at school. And I find The History Boys an interesting window into British school system and how the GCSEs are taken and what are the actual things that you have to do into getting into universities, and what universities mean to different socioeconomic status. And this is the I don't know if this was original play. I think it was. And yeah, I'm gonna put in a play because I've got another one coming up, which is not so category. I don't remember if anyone has put in plays, but yeah, Ellen Bennett's History Boys is one which I still go back to because the dialogue is quite good. And I don't know about the movie. I haven't watched it, but the play, it was incredible, and the text is incredible. So Ellen Bennett's The History Boys. And second to last is a Persephone book. Ooh, it's Noel Streatfeild's Saplings. This was also, these two go hand in hand because I remember I bought these at the same trip. And this is my first Persephone book, and I really like the idea that we lift up authors that have been forgotten, and Noel Streatfeild, because I hadn't read, oh my god, I want to say her children's books about the ballet world, and this was the first one that I read, and I do love how she depicts children in this book and families in this book, and this made me actually look into her children's books. Couldn't find them in here, so I've sort of forgotten them. But yeah, this is one thing that I really wanted to put into this list because not only because every other challenger has done this, put in books that they are not only interested whether Steve has read it, but have been in some way meaningful to them one way or the other. They might even think that the book is not that good, but they want to see if it is read by Steve. So Noel Streatfeild's Saplings is my second to last pick. And my last pick is actually a comic. Not comic. Well, a comic. Guy Delisle's Jerusalem. I adore Guy Delisle's books about his travels, and I decided to pick this because it's, again, very relevant topic. Chronicles from the Holy City. And what I find in Delisle's books is that, Delisle's book is that he is very intricate in getting all the small details that you don't get in, for instance, in travel books in general, but the little details that come from the back alleys and the conversations between the natives and seeing things from a drawer's perspective. So I could have picked any of his travel books. I think the book, for instance, in Pyongyang is incredibly funny in picking up the little details that the North Korean government doesn't want you to see, but because he's an illustrator and a comic artist, he sees all the tiny details. So Jerusalem, for this challenge, has Steve read it, is my last pick, and let's see how I do. You and people who organized this made me actually do a video, so let's see how I did. There you go. Bye.